Okay, it's a new day and now we're starting on the instructions. Says it's the print bed and powder bed assembly. So this is basically the rails that will go vertically that hold the screw nuts here that will drive the print chambers up and down. So I've got most of the parts laid out over here in some 3D. So there'll be 2 of these for the print chamber and 2 of them for the powder chamber. So I'll just do the, obviously I'll do the print chamber first, unless there's anything significant about the powder, which I don't think there will be. We'll just do the final assembly, show the final assembly on that. So it starts with, once again, it's got the trolley set here. I've got 2 of them laid out here. And then these are 330 millimeter profiles. And by the way, there's no pockets or anything on these. So when you look at the video, you'll see absolutely no pockets. And then it just says to wipe down any oil on these. And then we're gonna go ahead, I've already mounted the spring nuts. There's 4 in each one. And we're gonna go ahead and just mount these. Now, I always suggest you read ahead through, you know, like the next 10, 15 instructions, because you'll see things that's annotated down the road that you go, oh, that would have been nice to have known. So for instance, on mounting this later, you'll see a note that says, because if you look at the instruction, it looks like it's flush. But when you look at later down the road, it says that this should be 10 centimeters from the top. So I'm gonna start off there, and then I can always adjust. I'm assuming it's probably centered in here, but that's maybe a big assumption. But it looks like about, right now, it looks like about ½ an inch on both sides. That's close to the 10 centimeters. So I measure that up and we'll screw these on. So these take the M38, and we'll go ahead and use those to mount these on, M38s. The other thing that I wanted to mention, also reference reading ahead. As I read ahead, there's a point, and I'm going to go ahead and show you here. This here is the balancer plate, bottom piece, and then there's a top piece. So the difference is this one has a cutout. This one looks pretty symmetrical. And what it says, the reason I read ahead, and I went ahead and did the step already, this is at step 16, is it says to use the high temperature red silicone to fix the neodymium magnets. So that's what I did. I went ahead and did that now so that I don't have to, when I get to that step, I have to pause. So I figured by the time I get to this step, it'll be dry and ready to go. So there's 2 sets here, so I did both. You got to do the, well, this is the balancer plate bottom. It's got this unique cutout in it. There's 2 of those, 1 for each side, obviously. And then the same thing, this is the balancer plate top. And so the neodymium. And then you'll see later that we put these little balls on the opposite sides. And that's what the plate, the screw plate will move against. So we'll put these off the side while they're continuing to dry, but I just want to let you know that so that you do it now. I would go ahead and do that step. That's step 16. Take care of it now, and that way when you get there, they'll already be dry instead of you having to stop and go, ah, darn it. So, all right, so let's back to the rails then. We'll get the screws and get those mounted up. Okay, so the next step calls for this blade holder here, and it will just, it's a 3D part, and it just mounts right here. You can see where it lines up with the holes, and it will drop right on there like that. So basically it fits like that. And then I'll use these M312 socket cap screws. So we'll go ahead, I've already mounted this one up. This one's complete. So that's what it looks like there. So we'll go ahead and get this one mounted up, and then we'll see what the next step is. Okay, so the next step, then now that both of these are mounted up, we'll take them over to the cabinet now, and these are gonna assemble underneath the cabinet with the M5 screws here. Basically when they'll go on each side of the print chamber. I'll take you over there. the obviously should be centered. If you did all your profiles right, you should be centered underneath the print chamber. So we're going to take these over there. And the other thing, these rails came with, trolleys came with little buttons to hold it. So obviously when these go vertical, you don't want this to slide off. So that's why I keep these in here for that, so that they won't fall off. So let's head over to the cabinet. So over here on this side is the front, this side's the rear of the cabinet. And if you'll see here, you'll see a hole there, and that's where these will mount. So they'll come in here and mount under here. And it just so happens, thank goodness, I'm joking when I say that, but they line up directly, holes in top and bottom here line up, and they're in the center of that chamber. So we'll go ahead and install those per the instructions, and then show you the final here. Okay, so these installed really well on top and bottom. There wasn't really much to it. And then if we go here and look down the print chamber, you can see that they're obviously in the center of the print chamber and across from each other. And that's why when you're building this frame, in the very beginning, you pay very close attention to the where you orient these, because obviously from here to here was the 199.5, and that needs to be here, and it needs to be here, and obviously on the back side, so everything lines up square. If it's not, all I'm saying is, you know, if you screw up the bottoms, maybe, yeah, it'll be done pretty easy, but if you screw up this, I think there's gonna be a lot of work to disassemble that, basically starting over. So in the beginning, make sure you validate everything. All right, so the next step is you're gonna take another one of the stepper motors, and then you're gonna take this 3D part, it's just called the NEMA 17 holder, the stepper holder. It shows the wiring oriented to my right. And so this looks like then it drops down, according to the picture, and it mounts just like this. And it takes 4 M316s button head that go down in here with Loctite. So we're gonna go ahead and assemble that. Okay, so it calls for this stepper motor then. It's supposed to fit, and it shows the cord. This is the front of the unit here, and this is the rear. And per the instructions, it shows this dropping in between these rails here with this power to the rear. And then you have square nuts in here, then these will mount to. The problem is, you can see that is about as tight as fit you can get, and I'm not sure. And obviously it'll pinch the cords if I try to drop in there. So it's not it doesn't drop down. So so what I'm gonna have to do now, and I'm gonna probably do it to both sides, I'll build up another one of these motors here, and go ahead and take one of these bars, which means I got these cross beams are gonna have to move. It's kind of, don't like it, but I'm gonna have to move this, drop those down in there, and hopefully it doesn't, I can get them together tight enough for everything to line up. So we'll go from there, so I'll let you know how it goes. Okay, so that's exactly what I did, was I took out the screws out both ends of this bar, took the bolts out of this cross bar so that I can slightly move this out. When I did that, these dropped down, and then I fed the cord through there, obviously, so now it's oriented right, and this still seems to have some good freedom of movement. So that's good, because we'll have to set that position in line with these ball screw when we install that. So you may have to do what I did and just move this beam over, set these down, clear these so these point out the back, and then screw that back in. And it went in real easy. So, all right, just a learning moment there. All right, so the next step here is I'm going to put together basically the ball nut and ball screw. So this is the ball nut. It's already comes, that part's assembled. And then it's the 3D part. So it's just basically looks like it holds the thrust bearings in place. And which the thrust bearings look at, they come packaged. There's 3 parts. If you look at the picture on the assembly, which you'll see here, it just looks like stacked 3 washers. But if you see here, this is the bearing part. It's 2-sided. And then there's 2 other pieces here. And one has a grooved, which obviously goes down on the bearings. The other side's flat. And those will assemble like this. And you have to grease these up as well before assembly. And those go together like a pancake. And then the instructions, one goes here, then this, and then another one here. And then this here is this basically the collar here. And it's not really clear on the assembly instructions on what it looks like, but obviously this is it here. It's got 2 set screws here. We'll use Loctite when we're ready for the instructions. And so those are the parts. We'll get this assembled then, and then obviously this will drop down into those stepper motors that we assembled earlier. All right, so this is the assembled system here, and you can see this is called the hard coupler here, and then you can see the one thrust bearing here sandwiched between this here, and then the other thrust bearing set down in the recessed part of this, and that part obviously is the up part. So then the next step calls for then taking these plates here, okay, of the balancer plate bottom and balancer plate top. Now, if you recall, in the previous step I said, even though it says to do it here in this step, I told you to do it first because we had to silicone these magnets, neodymium magnets on. So I'm glad we did that because now it's already dry and we can just go right into the step. So this is, once again, that's the bottom, and it says to go ahead and take these little steel balls and then sit right on top of the plate above the magnets. And now we have those ready to go. So that's the next step, and what they'll do is they'll slide down over onto this. So I'm going to read through those instructions, but you can see obviously that groove here matches up here, so that'll drop down on there, and then we'll do some adjustments. So okay, so the next step was slide this bottom balancer plate here over this shaft and in that recess that we talked about. And then what it says is you take these M14 cap screws here, and it says to use your CA glue. So, and it comes here. It's called Loctite 454. So I put some the instant adhesive around the edge and inside, and drop those in there. Be careful. You don't want to obviously get your finger stuck, which I initially kind of almost did up here. So don't want to be embarrassed to be walking around with a part stuck to your hand. So here we go. So this is the first part. So far we've got that part. I've used this to kind of help raise it up so it wasn't causing issues there when I was assembling. So that's that part. And then the next step is going to be then this is kind of the next step's kind of tricky, and you'll see from picture here that's I've overlaid here to show. So the next step is that you take some M45s and then the other 3 holes that you didn't put the screws in, because these are not threaded, just by the way. I mean, obviously that's why you see glue. They're not threaded. We're going to drop then the M45s, and we put an M4 nut on here. Now this is where we're going to do some adjustments when the blade goes on here, so it slides over these bearings here. Then we'll bring the bottom moving plate, so one of these here, and this will set down there in line with the holes on here over those, and then we'll once that goes on, slide over to match up, and then we'll put the balancer plate top, then we'll go on top of that, and then it looks like then we'll start making some adjustments, obviously with the nuts here. What the instructions say is to take these M435s and get them started, and then you put these M4 nuts on them. Now, what I realize is you want to go up about, thread them up about 20 millimeters. And because what's going to happen is this plate goes on here, and then you're going to drop this down over here. And these holes here, we need to make sure we're going to start tightening these nuts up through those holes. And it says to add CA glue, like I said. I'm not 100% sure when we do that, because obviously I need, but what you're going to see is, in the instructions it shows, I screw this up, that nut's going to go up, and then I need to take the spanner wrench that they provide and tighten that back down to lock this nut in. So that's what you got to do. It says do simultaneously. Probably not the right words to use because I can't do all three at the same time. But basically in small increments, just keep moving them up. And it says to make sure that you're trying to get to where there's it moves freely and there's no vertical play in this like that. So it needs to be down set to where it's not moving. So that's that'd be my next step. I'll just start screwing these up and tightening down those nuts a little bit at a time. I'll probably squeeze some CA glue in those holes afterwards. I just don't want it setting up on me until I get it in there. So that's the plan, and we'll show you when we get back. Okay, so this step was, it was a little time consuming, and it actually took a little bit more effort and thought. So when you add these screws in and bring this top plate down, what I highly recommend is leave them short before they go into this piece. And then what I do is hold this piece hard against the plate, and that makes sure the little balls there are held tight. Then when you slowly start to bring them in, they all draw in at the same time, a little bit until they draw in at the same. I think initially when I did this, I had screwed up, one went into the plate and the other thread a little bit different, so it was leaving a gap, and I couldn't draw these all the way up. And I sent a message to Thomas, and he said, no, they got to go all the way up. Now, don't use the spanner wrench as they show in the instructions to kind of move it up and down. Just reach in there. What I did was I just reached in there with a small thing and moved that washer and spun it. A lot easier to do. Then when you get to the end, once you got everything up and through and looking good, then you can turn around and use your little spanner wrench and tighten that nut, put some Loctite on there and put it in there. So I did both of them. I still need to put the that set collar on, the washer. So I'll get these done, finished up there, and then we can move on to the next step. So there we go. Very tough, very difficult section here. Take your time, as they say. The movement of this, he says, is, moving freely between this is important in the operation. All right, so I probably I didn't show you all these steps. So basically, I brought over here, took the ball screw, and go ahead and set it down into this base, and get the arms in here mounted in the holders there, the blade. Get those mounted, not attached, just setting in them, and then drop it down into here, and then you can center the stepper motor. Once it's in these brackets here, you can center it and it sits, and then once you get that, then you can go ahead and screw in these into the square nuts that were previously there. So once this is fixed, then you're able to slide and move by hand. So you don't tighten this down yet. Don't lock it in yet, but you'll slide it up and down along the rails until it moves slowly and smoothly. And once it does that, then you can tighten those these rails screws back in, and then drop it all the way down into here, move the ball screw to the top here, and then go ahead and tighten your set screws. This is future Sean. Listen, regarding the set screws here, and I don't have a very good shot of this, but make sure you tighten down that set screw that attaches the ball screw to the stepper motor very tight, and make sure it's clamped down. I did it properly on the print, but when I did the powder, I didn't have it, and when I was assembling the rest of the components,
the ball screw kept sliding down, and I thought there was a problem, and then after investigation and talking with Thomas, I realized I needed to crank down that set screw. So make sure you do that right.
Of course, you'll mount these in once you get everything centered. And the other thing too about this, it says that there should be no vertical movement, but you want horizontal movement. So that's obviously important because this thing needs to be able to move a little, shift left to right in those as it moves in those guides. And so you can see once it's bound in there, you know, I couldn't move it up and down, but it would move vertical or horizontally. So, all right, and so once all that's in, then you go ahead and get the collar on here and lock the collar down on there, and everything's good to go. Yeah. You can rotate it by hand if you want and see how well it moves smoothly up and down. So that's the attachment of the ball screw. So basically we just need to do the other one, and it's taken me pretty much all morning to get just this one. I think just making sure it's done right, and I think that was my biggest concern is I don't want to err. This is what's going to move that print bed up and down smoothly. And you know, if this is not aligned and straight and everything, then you're gonna have problems in your print bed. So got to do it right. And right now it looks like I feel pretty good about this. It just took a long day, and I'll do the other side. It should go much easier, obviously, now that I've done one. And so that's what we'll end up doing. Okay, before I go any further on doing the rest of this print chamber side, I realized when I was looking at videos of Thomas that he had Kapton tape on the inside of his chambers. And so I asked him, I said, one, I didn't see it. I found this in the wiring kit is where he told me to find it. So I did find the Kapton tape. And I asked him, I said, hey, I saw that you had Kapton tape on yours, and I didn't see it in the instructions. And he said, you know, it's supposed to be all the corners where those come together, the tape is supposed to be on. So I went ahead and taped those before we start building up the rest of the stuff where it would be difficult to get in there. So just get it in there nice and smooth across the edges, and you should be good. And then just smooth it out, trim the edges really good, and make sure everything's down well. So, all right, now we can move on to the rest of this print chamber assembly. All right, so on these next steps, instead of doing it on this cabinet, on the one I've already assembled, I thought it'd be actually best to I can show you on this model here, and that way I think it'll be easier to see, and then I can show you the final assembled on the cabinet. So basically it says to take these two pieces, it's called a nut holder, and one thing it doesn't show it on the instructions, so I'll get the feedback to Thomas because I know he'll update it, is you take these nut holders, and one side has a bigger hole than the other, so this one goes straight through. I found this on another 3D printed part that makes sure you check to make sure, because there is a difference between which side the screw goes into. So this piece then will insert basically just between those two here. Actually, not on the end, I made a mistake already, but it'll be right here. And you can see there's a hole there, and it lines right up there. And then it says to use this M4, I believe it's an M4 14 socket head, and it'll go up and through there. It says to apply some CA glue, and then go ahead and screw it up into that part. Now, another thing I discovered too is it'll save you some time, is always, and I did it on this one just to demonstrate, always start your screw in and thread to make sure that hole's big enough for one, and two, it gets started. I think it's just going to be helpful because I find with these 3D printed parts, obviously the holes just maybe slightly, they're tight, okay? So just make sure you get them started on that. So we'll go ahead and assemble these here on this unit, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, now here it is, underneath the unit here. You know, I mean, you got to crawl under here, but what I did was I used this hex key to get up in there and tighten it. And I'm glad I started the holes initially, because I could see if you didn't, you'd be fighting that a little bit. So I got one on each side here, and now I'll go to the next step. I'll show you on the bench what the next step is. All right, so as you can see from the instructions then, you've got this ring spacer is what it's called, and it has these, what they call the nut irritation 3D printed parts. So this orients up, you can see these squares, which are actually going to align with the profiles later, and this one, particular one, goes up, and then these, once again, they've got 2 holes on the top here, and this part faces in, so they'll mount basically like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and, once again, I told you, actually just get them started. I noticed they were super tight again. Get them started in there. I already did these, but just kind of start them in there, because it makes it easier. So I'll go ahead and get those screwed up on the plate here, and then we'll see what's next. All right, so we've got those screwed on here to that plate, and then what the next step calls for is it calls for to basically bring this over the top, and then it will line over those other the nuts there, and then these holes will align here on the bottom plate here. There's some holes there, and what these will end up doing is you take these M525 socket heads through the Teflon washer. They'll come up down through here, up through there, and then this aligns with the profile on the bottom of the unit and screws up into the profile. It says to use some Loctite, and so we'll do that to both sides. So we'll go ahead and get under the unit and go ahead and add this, and then we'll give you a good look at it when it's all on. Okay, in that last step I said these go into the profiles. Actually, on that one step you'll see that it calls for the 223 profiles that actually those screws go up into, as you can see in the photo. So a couple things on the here. When you looked at the instructions for this, initially I thought the Teflon washer went between this blade and the screw, and when you hit the next assembly, it shows it drawn up into it, and the Teflon washer is actually between this plate and the blade. And then this, the profile that I just showed you, sits on top of that, into that groove, and screws up into that. And then this is just the view from the top side. You can see how those are actually, they're not down in the slot. I just noticed that one's off kilter. So that's something to keep an eye on, make sure that these are in their slot. This one is turned, so I'll have to readjust that one. All right, and as you can see from the assembly video, then we need to install 4 of these there. It says there it says 7x5 by 15s on the assembly, but obviously these are the correct springs. So it takes 2 of those, they fit into those grooves, and it says, as it says there in the note, wait until you hear the click. So I'll get under the unit, probably use a little screwdriver to kind of push them up in there and make sure they're positioned properly. All right, I was just going to show you, because I'm underneath the unit, but I'm just going to kind of show you on here. You can see how small this little spring is. And this is what it looks like underneath the unit when you're under there. And what I found was that the best technique is to squeeze it, get it. Now, hopefully these are so small, I hope I don't lose this. But I'll tell you what, it's a little difficult, but if you get up under there, you squeeze this here and slide it like here, and then you can push it in and you'll hear it click, and then it's in those grooves. Okay, so that's how those go in there, and was the best technique I found when you're underneath the unit. So I can take you over there to show you what the actual unit looked like So I'm down here on the ground and we're gonna flip you upside down. You can now see those springs installed in there. All right, so I skipped ahead in the instructions because I read ahead that I'm going to need the print bed top, I'm going to need to silicone this print bed heat pad, and this is the 120 by 120 which goes with the print bed top. And so what it says is to basically center it on here, and so I actually 27 was my magic number, so 27 millimeters from each edge gets me centered. So I made little red marks there with a little red marker, and that way when I silicone that, I'll feel pretty confident that's about in the center. So I'm doing this now because it says it needs to be obviously dry when we get ready to use this. And so we'll be, while we're preparing the print bed bottom over here, it'll give this time. So basically look at this print bed top and just look at your instructions, because on the bottom there is the countersinks. So this mounts on top of here, and also it tells you to roughen up the surface. So I took some I think it was 150 grit and roughened the surface here, and then took some ethanol to clean this up, so it gets good adhesion. So I'm going to go ahead and put my the red silicone on the back of this and attach it to here, and then we can move on to the next steps. So I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to move over to the next step, which now uses the print bottom here, print bed bottom. So it looks like in this particular case, you can see you need to check this. We got 2 holes here and 1 hole over one of those. So there obviously is a difference in how this orients. And if I look at this in the picture, it actually shows the smaller hole lined up over this, like this. And when I hold it in front of me like this, this is how I got it. So we'll go ahead and get the parts for this next step and get this assembled. Okay, so I got the parts here. So you've got the print bed bottom. We know the orientation for that now. And these are called the top plate spacer short. And it takes 4 of those. When we get to the powder assembly, then they use the longer ones. 2 of the long ones, 2 of the short ones for the powder. So we need to make sure these do have an orientation. They have a countersunk holes in them. The other side doesn't, so make sure you get oriented. And you can see how they just go along here and they line up with these holes here. And it says to use M3/8. Doesn't say to use Loctite. So we're going to go ahead and get this mounted on here, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so nothing really remarkable on this. They went down pretty well, and you're only inserting 2 screws on each one of these where the countersink is. They're going pretty easy, so I just got them started and slightly tightened, and then once I got them all in, it just came a little snug. So the next step then, we're going to add this along with another one of these spacers, ring spacers, along with a Teflon washer, and it looks like it'll mount down on those 2 rails, and the Teflon washer goes in between here. Okay, so what I've done is I've come over here, taken this top cover and flipped it, and then I did add some red silicone underneath those washers to hold them. And then we'll come over here and take this plate here, and it says to put it over that. And if you noticed, everything I've done, the 2 holes, I'm going to take this back out, the 2 holes here, right there, everything's oriented to the back of the cabinet here. At least that's what from the orientation, so everything lines that way. And then I'm going to drop this down on here over those washers, and that silicone holds them in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and drive the M5 screws that go down through there and they actually are from the instruction you can see there's a washer there and a spring washer slash lock washer is what it says in the instructions, but they're spring washers. So we'll go ahead and put those down in there and lock it all down. Okay, so we got those screws tightened down on the print top, and then this here is a ceramic paper, and so it says to go ahead and put that in there, but we're not going to trim it. It says the last step is the trimming. Okay, I already got one of these spacers here, and what these do is, as you see from the instructions, they go between here. So once you put those in there, like I did with this one, then you can go ahead and put in the springs here. So they fit in those little pockets. You can see, and there's a third one I haven't put in there yet. But then that helps hold that side plate against that ceramic paper. So we'll just go along around. We'll use a screwdriver to hold this into place when I install this one. And then when we get to the end, we can trim and get that all sealed up. All right, so we've got the ceramic paper. Like I said, I would use my screwdriver to kind of hold this corners in place as I place these side plates, and then install the springs. And then when I made a final trim, I actually just put a dab of silicone just to hold that, hold this after I trimmed it. So just a dab on it, not anything to catch on anything. So it's just in the inside. So now it calls to put these corner spring braces in and drop the spring. So I will tell you, if you've got fat fingers, this is going to be difficult for you. So maybe you need to get someone with a little more nimble fingers. But yeah, getting those springs compressed and kind of slip down in there was a little bit challenging. But overall, once they find those pockets in the side, they snap right in. So, all right, let's get those corner springs in, and we're getting close to having the print chamber, at least this part, completed. Okay, I've got 3 of the corners in, and I thought I'd try to show you here if I can. So first of all, you need to, when you go in, you need to squeeze this between your thumbs and compress as much as possible. And then what I did was came down in here and used my screwdriver, give it a little gap, and boom, it snapped right in there. So once I kind of figured that out, they went in fairly easy. But it's like I said, you got to compress that spring and get it between that gap evenly. Otherwise, it springs pops out. And these are hard to find on my floor here, so it's not a good thing to do. All right, so looks like this is complete. And now we're going to move to the top plate where we glued on the print heater. So let's go get that. It should be dry by now. Okay, so as you can see for the next step, here's the plate, the top plate, and we glued on that heater. So basically what it's going to end up doing now is, per the instructions, you can see the hole right down in here, and that's where these are going to thread through. So I think what we're going to do is slowly thread those down through there. We'll get that threaded through, and then I'll show you the final from underneath on how we route those wires. Okay, not sure how well you can see here, but those the wires came down through that hole, and then they run down along this profile here, so you can see the wires, and you can see that in the assembly drawing. And then it goes down through that hole right here at the top of this plate. Then in between the blade and that plate, that hole, I don't know, I think this hole needs to be bigger. It took me a little while, but I got actually both the larger, these white lines here. I got the white ones through first, and then you take the black ones and you can slide them down in and push them through individually and get them fed through. That's what I found worked best eventually. So anyway, that runs down on that channel. I'm going to tie this up so it doesn't get in the way here, but and I think now we use some tape to hold that wire against the profile. So we'll do that next. So I found, obviously I found if I lowered this all the way down, I would have had a lot easier access. That's how I put the tape on, and then realized it would have been a lot easier access in that hole. I was trying to reach up and find it. So anyway, now I know how to do the powder chamber more efficiently. Okay, and then we finish off the plate by putting in the flathead screws in there. And it looks like everything looks pretty good. I can turn the ball screw and this moves up nice and smooth. So that's always a good sign. So, all right, we've got the print bed assembly actually completed here. And this, what I'll end up doing then is I'll stop here, and the instructions for the powder bed over here are the same. So we'll get that one. So when we come back, I don't need to show you that. We'll come back, we'll begin after we get all that completed. All right, so now we've got both the powder and print chamber assembled, and everything underneath looks good. Everything moves up and down smoothly. So I feel pretty good about this step so far. All right, on to the next step.